I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in January, sipping coffee and watching the snow fall outside my window in Denver, Colorado, when someone started pounding on my front door like they were trying to break it down. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the aggressive knocking immediately put me on edge. I set down my mug and walked to the door, looking through the peephole to see a middle-aged woman with a severe blonde bob haircut, standing on my porch with her arms crossed and a scowl on her face that could curdle milk. I opened the door halfway, keeping the screen door latched. "Can I help you?" "Yes, you absolutely can," she said, her voice sharp and accusatory. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, and I'm here to inform you that you are in violation of our snow removal policy. The common area adjacent to your property has not been cleared, and it's been over 24 hours since the snowfall stopped." I blinked at her, confused. "I'm sorry, what common area?" "The green space between your property line and the walking trail," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the side of my house. "According to HOA bylaws, homeowners are responsible for clearing snow from any common areas that border their property within 24 hours of snowfall cessation." I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat. "Madam, I think you've got the wrong house. I'm not part of any HOA." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. Every property in Meadowbrook Hills is part of the HOA. It's mandatory, not mine," I said firmly. "I specifically bought this house because it wasn't part of an HOA. My name is Marcus Young. I've owned this property for 3 years, and I've never paid HOA dues, never received HOA documents, and I'm not bound by any HOA rules." Patricia's face was turning an interesting shade of red. "That's impossible. This entire development is governed by the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. You must have missed your welcome packet." "I didn't miss anything," I said, my patience already wearing thin. "My house was built in 1987, long before your HOA existed. When they developed the neighborhood around me in 2015, my property wasn't included. I checked all of this very carefully before I bought." "I don't care what you think you checked," Patricia snapped. "The fact remains that there is snow in the common area by your house, and you need to clear it immediately or you'll be fined." I felt my jaw tighten. "Let me make this crystal clear. I am not a member of your HOA. You have no authority over me or my property. That common area you're talking about, if it's not on my property, it's not my responsibility. Now please leave." "I will not leave until you agree to clear that snow," she said, her voice rising. "This is a community and we all have to do our part. Madam, I'm asking you nicely one more time. Leave my property." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of me through the screen door. "I'm documenting your refusal to comply with HOA regulations. You will be hearing from our attorney." I closed the door in her face and locked it. Through the window, I watched her stomp back to her silver Lexus SUV, still taking pictures of my house with her phone. This was exactly the kind of nonsense I'd moved to avoid when I bought this place. My house sat on a corner lot on Birch Street, a modest 2-story with blue siding that I'd repainted myself when I moved in. It had a decent-sized yard with mature trees, a detached garage, and most importantly, no HOA restrictions. The neighborhood around me had been farmland when my house was built, but a developer had come in about 11 years ago and built Meadowbrook Hills, a sprawling subdivision of cookie-cutter homes with strict rules about everything from mailbox colors to grass height. My property was like an island, grandfathered in and completely independent. I'd done my homework before buying. I'd checked the deed, reviewed the title insurance, and had my real estate attorney verify that there were no covenants, conditions, or restrictions attached to my property. I'd specifically asked about HOA involvement and everything had come back clean. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. I went back to my coffee thinking that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, I came home from work around 6 in the evening to find a bright orange notice zip tied to my mailbox. It was printed on official-looking letterhead with Meadowbrook Hills HOA emblazoned across the top in bold letters. The notice informed me that I was being fined $500 for failure to maintain common area snow removal within the prescribed time frame, and that the fine would increase by $100 per day until compliance was achieved. I ripped the notice off my mailbox and took it inside. My first call was to Dave Martinez, the real estate attorney who'd handled my purchase. He was a straight-shooting guy in his 50s who'd helped me navigate the closing process with patience and expertise. "Dave, it's Marcus Young. I've got a situation." I explained what had happened, reading him the notice word for word. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he let out a long sigh. "Marcus, do you still have all your closing documents? Your deed, title, insurance policy, and the survey?" "Yeah, everything's in my filing cabinet." "Good. Scan them and email them to me. Also scan that notice. From what you're telling me, you're absolutely right that you're not part of the HOA. Your property predates their formation, and there's no way they can legally compel you to join or follow their rules. But they're not going to back down easily. These HOA boards can be incredibly aggressive, especially when they think someone's challenging their authority. So what do I do? First, don't pay that fine. Don't acknowledge their authority in any way. Second, send them a cease and desist letter. I'll draft it for you. Third, document everything. Every interaction, every notice, every phone call. If they escalate this, we'll need a record. You think they'll actually take this to court?" "I've seen HOAs do crazier things," Dave said. "Some of these board members get drunk on power. They genuinely believe they're running a fiefdom. Just sit tight, send me those documents, and let me handle the legal response." I spent the next hour scanning everything and emailing it to Dave. Then I took photos of the notice on my mailbox, the surrounding area, and the so-called common space that Patricia wanted me to clear. It was a strip of land about 20 feet wide that ran along the side of my property, separating my lot from a paved walking trail that the HOA had installed. The trail was definitely on HOA common property, but the strip of grass and the few trees growing there weren't on my land according to my survey. 2 days later, I received an email from Dave with a cease and desist letter attached. It was beautifully written, politely but firmly explaining that I was not a member of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, that my property was not subject to their governing documents, and that any further attempts to impose fines or regulations on me would be considered harassment and would result in legal action. He'd also included copies of my deed and survey as exhibits, highlighting the relevant sections. "Send this via certified mail," Dave instructed over the phone. "Make sure you get a return receipt. That way we have proof they received it." I printed the letter, drove to the post office, and sent it off. I felt a small sense of satisfaction as I watched the postal worker stamp it and hand me the receipt. Maybe now Patricia and her HOA would leave me alone. That satisfaction lasted exactly 5 days. The following Tuesday, I was working from home when I heard a truck engine outside. I looked out my window to see a landscaping company truck parked on the street, and 2 guys in heavy coats were unloading snow shovels and a small plow attachment. They started clearing the strip of land next to my property, the same common area Patricia had been complaining about. I pulled on my boots and coat and went outside. "Hey guys, what are you doing?" The older of the two workers, a heavyset man with a gray beard, looked up. HOA hired us to clear this area. We got a work order. Can I see it? He shrugged and pulled a sheet of paper from his truck. The work order was from the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, and it listed my address as the service location. At the bottom, there was a note that said the cost of the service would be billed to the homeowner for non-compliance with snow removal requirements. Listen, I appreciate that you're just doing your job, but I'm not part of this HOA, and I didn't authorize this work, I said. They're going to try to bill me for this, and I'm not paying for it. The worker scratched his beard. Man, I don't know anything about that. We just go where they tell us. You got a problem with it, you need to talk to them. I understand, but I'm telling you right now, I don't want this work done. If you do it anyway, you're doing it at the HOA's expense, not mine. He and his partner exchanged glances. The younger guy said, "We already drove all the way out here. We got to do something or we don't get paid." I was about to respond when another car pulled up, a silver Lexus SUV that I recognized immediately. Patricia Henderson got out, her expression triumphant. "Mr. Young, since you refuse to clear the common area, the HOA has taken it upon ourselves to hire professionals. You will be billed for the service, plus an administrative fee for our trouble." "You're not billing me for anything," I said evenly. "I sent you a cease and desist letter explaining that I'm not part of your HOA. Did you even read it?" "I read your little letter," she said dismissively. "Our attorney reviewed it and determined it was without merit. Your property is within the boundaries of Meadowbrook Hills, and therefore you are subject to our rules." "Your attorney is wrong. My deed clearly shows—" "I don't care what you think your deed shows," Patricia interrupted. "The HOA has a responsibility to maintain community standards. Your refusal to cooperate is selfish and disruptive. Now, these gentlemen are going to clear the snow and you are going to pay for it. If you don't, we'll place a lien on your property." I felt anger flaring up, but I kept my voice calm. "You can't place a lien on my property for HOA dues or fines because I'm not a member. Any attempt to do so would be fraud." "We'll see what the courts say about that," Patricia said smugly. She turned to the workers. "Gentlemen, please proceed with the work." I pulled out my phone and called Dave Martinez. He answered on the second ring. "Dave, they're here with a landscaping crew trying to clear snow from that common area. They're saying they're going to bill me for it and put a lien on my property if I don't pay." "Are you recording this conversation?" "No, should I be?" "Yes. Switch to video and document everything. Don't interfere with the workers, but make it clear on camera that you don't authorize the work and that you're not responsible for payment. Also get the name of the landscaping company. I'll send them a letter too, putting them on notice that they won't be paid by you." I switched my phone to video mode and started recording. "For the record, I'm Marcus Young, owner of this property. Today is January 21st, and I'm being told that the Meadowbrook Hills HOA has hired landscapers to clear snow from a common area that's not on my property. I did not authorize this work. I am not a member of this HOA, and I will not be paying for this service." Patricia stepped in front of my camera. "Turn that off. You don't have permission to record me. We're on a public street, and I have every right to record what's happening on and around my property," I said. "You're the one who came onto my property uninvited. I'm on the common area, not your property. You walked through my driveway to get there. That's my property." She huffed and walked back toward her SUV, pulling out her own phone. I turned my camera toward the landscaping truck and zoomed in on the company name, Green Meadow Landscaping Services. I made sure to get a clear shot of their phone number on the truck door too. The workers looked uncomfortable but continued with their job, clearing the snow from the strip of grass. It took them about 45 minutes. When they finished, the younger worker came over to me. "Look, man, I don't know what's going on between you and the HOA, but just so you know, we only got paid half upfront. They're supposed to pay us the other half when we're done. We already called our boss and told him there might be an issue with payment. He said he's going to send the invoice directly to the HOA, not to you, so don't worry about it." "I appreciate that," I said. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this mess." He shrugged. "Not the first time we've dealt with HOA drama, won't be the last." After they left, Patricia drove away without another word, but not before taking more photos of my property with her phone. I went back inside and immediately called Dave again to update him. "Good work documenting everything," he said. "I'll send a letter to Green Meadow Landscaping explaining the situation and confirming that you're not responsible for payment. I'll also send another, stronger letter to the HOA. This is starting to cross the line into harassment. What are my options if they keep this up? If they persist, we can file for a restraining order and possibly sue for harassment. I'm also going to request that they provide their legal basis for claiming you're part of the HOA. Their attorney should know better. Either they have incompetent legal counsel, or they're deliberately ignoring the facts." Over the next week, things escalated. I received 3 more violation notices, each one tacked to my mailbox or wedged into my front door. The alleged violations included failure to trim trees that were overhanging into the common area, having a trash can visible from the street on a non-collection day, and parking my work truck in my driveway instead of in my garage. Each notice came with a fine ranging from $200 to $500. The trash can thing was particularly absurd. I'd taken the trash out the night before collection like I always did, but apparently, HOA rules required all trash cans to be stored out of sight except on collection days between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. My trash pickup was at 7:30 in the morning, which meant I'd technically violated their rule by putting it out the night before, except that I wasn't subject to their rules in the first place. The truck violation was equally ridiculous. I drove a Ford F-150 for work. I was a construction project manager, and I needed the truck to haul tools and materials. It was clean, well-maintained, and less than 5 years old. According to the violation notice, HOA rules prohibited commercial vehicles from being parked in driveways overnight. I parked my truck in my own driveway on my own property, and the HOA had no say in the matter. I documented every violation notice, photographed them, and forwarded everything to Dave. He was putting together a comprehensive file for what he said would likely become a lawsuit if the HOA didn't back off. Then things took a turn that made me genuinely angry. I came home from a job site one evening in early February to find my mailbox had been removed. Not knocked over or damaged by accident, but deliberately removed. The post had been unscrewed from its concrete base, and the mailbox itself was gone. In its place was a bright orange flag sticking out of the ground with a note attached. Your mailbox was not in compliance with HOA standards. It has been removed for replacement. You will be billed for the cost of installation of an approved mailbox. Until installation is complete, your mail will be held at the HOA office for pickup during business hours. I stood there staring at the empty spot where my mailbox had been, feeling a rage building in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was theft. They'd stolen my property and were holding my mail hostage. I immediately called Dave, but it was after 6 and I got his voicemail. I left a message explaining what happened, then called the non-emergency police line. A dispatcher took my information and said an officer would come out to take a report. Officer Jason Wells arrived about 30 minutes later. He was a young guy, probably in his late 20s, with a professional demeanor. I explained the situation, showed him the note, and gave him a summary of the ongoing dispute with the HOA. "So they just took your mailbox?" he asked, writing in his notepad. "Apparently. I left for work this morning and it was here. I came home and it was gone." "Do you have any proof that the HOA did this?" I showed him the note. "This is their letterhead, and it's the same kind of notices I've been getting from them for weeks." He studied the note. "Okay, but technically this could have been left by anyone. Do you have security cameras?" "No, I don't." "Any witnesses?" "Not that I know of." He sighed. "Look, I believe you, but without direct evidence this is going to be tough to prove. I can file a report for theft of property, and you can give the HOA's information as potential suspects. But realistically, this is probably going to end up being a civil matter rather than criminal." "What about my mail?" "They're saying they're holding it at their office." "That's actually a federal issue," Officer Wells said. "Interfering with mail delivery is a serious offense. You should contact the postal inspector's office tomorrow and let them know what's happening. They don't mess around with mail tampering." He gave me a case number for the theft report and suggested I install security cameras as soon as possible. After he left, I spent the rest of the evening researching doorbell cameras and property security systems. I ended up ordering a complete setup that included a video doorbell, 2 cameras covering my front and side yards, and a camera for the backyard. The system would store footage in the cloud and send alerts to my phone anytime motion was detected. The next morning, I called the United States Postal Inspection Service and explained the situation. The woman I spoke with was very interested in the mail diversion aspect, and she took detailed notes about Patricia Henderson and the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. "Sir, it's illegal for anyone other than you or an authorized representative to take custody of your mail," she said. "If the HOA has instructed the postal carrier to hold your mail at their office, that's a federal offense. I'm going to open an investigation and have an inspector contact you within 48 hours." I also called Dave Martinez first thing. He was furious about the mailbox. "That's theft, pure and simple. And the mail situation is a federal crime. Marcus, I think it's time we stop playing defense and go on offense. I'm going to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're also going to seek an injunction prohibiting them from contacting you or interfering with your property in any way." "How long will that take?" "I can have the complaint filed by the end of the week." Getting a court date for the injunction hearing will probably take a few weeks, but we can request an emergency temporary restraining order if they do anything else in the meantime. "Do it," I said. "I'm done being nice about this." I also drove to Home Depot and bought a new mailbox, identical to the one that had been stolen. It was a standard black mailbox on a white post, nothing fancy, but it was mine and I was putting it back where it belonged. I spent an hour that afternoon reinstalling it, and I felt a small sense of satisfaction when I was done. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a different woman from the HOA standing there. This one younger than Patricia, probably in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Hi, I'm Valerie Cooper, treasurer of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA," she said, her tone more measured than Patricia's had been. "I wanted to talk to you about the ongoing situation." "Are you here to return my stolen mailbox?" I asked. "I understand you're upset about that, but the mailbox that was removed was not in compliance with our architectural standards. All mailboxes in Meadowbrook Hills must be powder-coated bronze with stone veneer posts. Your mailbox was black metal on a white wooden post. And I'm not part of Meadowbrook Hills HOA, so your architectural standards don't apply to me, I said. You stole my property. I've filed a police report and my attorney is filing a lawsuit. If you're here to make some kind of offer to settle this, I'm listening, but if you're here to make more demands, you can leave now. She shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'll be honest with you. Patricia has been, let's say, overzealous in her approach. Some of us on the board think she's handled this badly. But the fact remains that your property is surrounded by HOA property, and there are legitimate concerns about maintaining consistent standards in the neighborhood. Then you should have thought about that before you developed around my house, I said. I was here first. I didn't ask to be surrounded by an HOA, and I made absolutely certain before I bought this place that I wouldn't be part of one. I understand that, but can't we find some kind of compromise? What if we waived the fines and agreed not to charge you for the landscaping service, in exchange for you voluntarily agreeing to maintain your property to certain basic standards? You want me to voluntarily follow HOA rules without being a member or having any voting rights, just the basic ones. Keeping your grass cut, not leaving trash cans out, parking commercial vehicles in the garage, things that affect property values for your neighbors. I shook my head. No. I'm not making any deals with you. I maintain my property just fine, and I've been doing it my way for 3 years without any problems. The only reason you're here is because Patricia decided to go on a power trip. If you want to make this right, return my mailbox, put in writing that the HOA will leave me alone and drop all these fake fines. Otherwise, I'll see you in court, Valerie sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. For what it's worth, I'm sorry this got so out of hand. If you're really sorry, vote to remove Patricia from the board, I said. She's going to get your HOA sued into bankruptcy if she keeps this up. After Valerie left, I called Dave and told him about the conversation. He advised me not to accept any compromises that required me to follow HOA rules, even voluntarily, because it could be used later as evidence that I acknowledged their authority over my property. The security cameras arrived 2 days later, and I spent a Saturday morning installing them. The system was easier to set up than I expected, and within a few hours, I had full coverage of my property with crystal clear video and motion alerts on my phone. I tested it by walking around my yard, and sure enough, my phone buzzed each time I entered a camera's field of view. It didn't take long for the cameras to prove their worth. 3 days after installation, I was at work when I got a motion alert on my phone around 2 in the afternoon. I checked the video feed and saw Patricia Henderson and another woman I didn't recognize walking around my property with a clipboard, taking photos and making notes. They weren't on the common area this time. They were on my actual property, walking through my side yard and around to my backyard. I immediately called Dave. They're on my property right now. I'm watching them on my security cameras. Are they causing any damage? Not that I can see. They're just walking around taking pictures. That's trespassing. Call the police and report it. Save that video footage. This is exactly the kind of evidence we need. I called 911 this time, not the non-emergency line. I explained that I had people trespassing on my property and that there was an ongoing harassment situation with my HOA. The dispatcher said an officer would be there shortly. I also called my supervisor and explained I had an emergency at home. He knew about my HOA problems because I'd mentioned them in passing, and he told me to take care of it and not worry about work. I made it home in 20 minutes, pushing the speed limit the whole way. A police cruiser was already parked in front of my house, and Officer Wells was talking to Patricia and the other woman in my driveway. I parked and got out. "Mr. Young," Officer Wells said when he saw me, "these ladies say they're from your HOA and were conducting a property inspection." "They're trespassing," I said. "I have video of them walking around my property without permission." Patricia's face was flushed. "We have the right to inspect properties for code violations." "You don't have any rights on my property," I said. "I'm not part of your HOA and you're not welcome here." Officer Wells looked between us. "Madam, is Mr. Young a member of your HOA? His property is within our jurisdiction," Patricia said evasively. "That's not what I asked. Is his name on your membership roster? Does he pay HOA dues?" Patricia hesitated. "We believe he should be a member based on the location of his property. But he's not currently a member. It's complicated." Officer Wells turned to me. "Mr. Young, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" I looked at Patricia. She was glaring at me with undisguised contempt, and I could see she still didn't think she'd done anything wrong. The woman with her looked mortified, her eyes darting between Patricia and the officer. "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges against both of them." The other woman spoke up for the first time. "I'm sorry, I didn't know this was trespassing. Patricia told me we had the right to be here. I'm just a volunteer on the architectural committee. I'll leave right now and I won't come back." "What's your name, madam?" Officer Wells asked. "Susan Richards." "Miss Richards, I appreciate your cooperation. Mr. Young, are you willing to drop the charges against Miss Richards if she agrees to stay off your property?" I nodded. "Yes, that's fine." Officer Wells turned to Patricia. "Miss Henderson, I'm going to issue you a citation for trespassing. You need to stay off Mr. Young's property unless you have his explicit permission to be here. Do you understand?" "This is ridiculous," Patricia said. "I'm an elected official of the HOA. I have a duty to enforce our bylaws." "You have no authority over someone who's not a member of your HOA," Officer Wells said firmly. "If you come back onto this property without permission, you'll be arrested. Is that clear?" Patricia snatched the citation from his hand without answering and stalked back to her Lexus. Susan Richards apologized again and hurried to her own car. After they left, Officer Wells turned to me. "Mr. Young, I have to tell you I've dealt with this HOA before. They've got a reputation for being aggressive. You might want to consider getting a restraining order." "My attorney is already working on it," I said. "We're filing a lawsuit against them too." "Good. Make sure you keep all that video footage. It'll help your case." That evening, I reviewed all the security camera footage and backed it up to an external hard drive and a separate cloud storage account. The video clearly showed Patricia and Susan walking onto my property, going around the side of my house, and spending nearly 20 minutes examining my yard, taking photos and writing notes. At one point, Patricia tried to look through my garage window, shading her eyes with her hand to see inside. I sent the footage to Dave, along with the citation Officer Wells had issued to Patricia. Dave called me back within an hour, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Marcus, this is perfect. We've got her on video trespassing, and we've got a police citation to back it up. I'm going to file an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order first thing tomorrow morning. With this evidence, I'm confident we'll get it." "How fast can that happen?" "If the judge agrees it's an emergency, we could have a hearing within a few days. In the meantime, I'll also serve the HOA with our formal complaint. It's time they understood how serious this is." The lawsuit Dave filed was comprehensive. It named the Meadowbrook Hills HOA as the primary defendant, along with Patricia Henderson individually. The claims included harassment, trespassing, theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and slander of title for their threats to place a lien on my property. We were seeking actual damages for the cost of replacing my mailbox and installing the security system, punitive damages for their egregious conduct, and attorney's fees. The temporary restraining order motion was filed the next day, and we got a hearing date for the following Monday. Dave explained that the hearing would be relatively quick, probably just 30 minutes or so, where we'd present our evidence, and the HOA would have a chance to respond. Over the weekend, I got a call from Postal Inspector Donald Wright. He was a serious-sounding man in his 50s who wanted to meet with me in person to discuss the mail situation. We arranged to meet at my house on Saturday afternoon. Inspector Wright arrived exactly on time, driving an unmarked sedan. He was tall and lean, with close-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes. I invited him in and offered coffee, which he accepted. "Mr. Young, I've reviewed your complaint about the HOA interfering with your mail delivery," he said, pulling out a notepad. "Can you walk me through exactly what happened with your mailbox?" I told him the whole story, showing him photos of the empty mailbox post, the note that had been left, and the police report I'd filed. I also showed him the video footage I had of Patricia and Susan trespassing. "And they claimed they were holding your mail at their office?" Inspector Wright asked. "That's what the note said. I didn't actually try to pick up my mail there because my postal carrier continued delivering to my house after I reinstalled the mailbox. But the note specifically said my mail would be held at the HOA office until an approved mailbox was installed." Inspector Wright made notes. "Did you speak to your postal carrier about this?" "No, should I have? I'd like to. What time does your mail usually arrive?" "Usually between 2 and 3 in the afternoon." "I'm going to come back Monday afternoon and talk to your carrier. In the meantime, I'll be contacting the HOA to inform them that interfering with mail delivery is a federal offense. If they actually did redirect your mail, someone could be looking at criminal charges." After Inspector Wright left, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The HOA had pushed too far, and now they were going to face real consequences. Patricia Henderson's petty tyranny was about to run headfirst into actual law enforcement and the legal system. Monday morning arrived, and I took the day off work to attend the restraining order hearing. Dave met me at the courthouse, carrying a thick folder of documents and a laptop with all the video evidence queued up. "How do you think this will go?" I asked as we waited outside the courtroom. "I think we've got a strong case," Dave said. "The video evidence of trespassing is damning, especially combined with the police citation. The judge is going to see a clear pattern of harassment." We were called into the courtroom at 10:30. Judge Rebecca Morrison presided, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. Patricia Henderson was there with a lawyer I didn't recognize, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Robert Blake, attorney for the HOA. Dave presented our case first, walking the judge through the timeline of events and playing the security camera footage on the courtroom's display screen. The video of Patricia walking around my property and peering through my garage window was particularly damaging. Dave also presented copies of all the violation notices, the theft report for the mailbox, and Officer Wells' citation for trespassing. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of harassment and stalking by an HOA that refuses to accept that Mr. Young is not subject to their authority," Dave argued. Despite being provided with proof that his property is not part of the HOA, including deed documentation and a formal cease and desist letter, the defendants have continued to escalate their conduct. They've issued baseless fines, stolen his property, trespassed on his land, and threatened to place illegal liens. Mr. Young has a right to the quiet enjoyment of his property without this constant harassment. Judge Morrison turned to Robert Blake. Counselor, I'm going to give you a chance to respond, but I have to say, that video is pretty clear. What's the HOA's position on this? Blake stood, looking less confident than he had when we started. Your Honor, there has been some confusion about whether Mr. Young's property falls within the HOA's jurisdiction. The HOA board acted in good faith based on their understanding of the situation. Good faith, Judge Morrison said, raising an eyebrow. Your client was issued a citation for trespassing. She was captured on video walking around his property without permission. How is that good faith? Miss Henderson believed she had the authority to conduct the inspection as HOA president, Blake said. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that persisted even after she was provided with deed documentation showing the property wasn't part of the HOA. Blake shifted uncomfortably. We dispute the interpretation of those documents, Your Honor. Judge Morrison looked down at the papers in front of her. I've reviewed the deed Mr. Young provided. It's pretty straightforward. His property was not included in the HOA when it was formed in 2015. There's no covenant, condition, or restriction binding him to the HOA. On what basis does your client claim authority over his property? The property is geographically located within the boundaries of the Meadowbrook Hills development, Your Honor. The HOA believes that creates an obligation. That's not how property law works, Counselor, and you know it, Judge Morrison said sharply. Geography alone doesn't create an HOA obligation. There needs to be a legal instrument binding the property. Do you have any such instrument? We're still researching that issue, Your Honor. In other words, no. Judge Morrison shook her head. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. Miss Henderson and any agents or representatives of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA are prohibited from contacting Mr. Young, entering his property, or taking any action that affects his property or his rights. The restraining order will remain in effect pending the outcome of the underlying lawsuit. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Blake said quietly. Mr. Blake, I strongly suggest you advise your client to drop this matter entirely. From what I've seen here today, the HOA doesn't have a leg to stand on, and continued harassment could result in significant damages. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. Dave and I left the courtroom feeling victorious. The restraining order was a huge win, and Judge Morrison's comments made it clear she saw through the HOA's nonsense. That went better than I expected, Dave said as we stood outside the courthouse. Judge Morrison basically told them they're going to lose the lawsuit if they keep pushing. Blake would be smart to recommend they settle. What happens next? The HOA has to respond to our lawsuit within 30 days. Then we go through discovery, where we can request documents and take depositions. Given what the judge said today, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a settlement offer before we even get to discovery. That afternoon, Inspector Wright showed up at my house at 2:15, just as my postal carrier arrived. The carrier was a woman named Jennifer who I'd chatted with a few times over the years. She looked nervous when she saw the inspector's credentials. Miss Thompson, I'm Inspector Wright with the Postal Inspection Service. I need to ask you some questions about mail delivery to this address. Jennifer glanced at me, then back at Inspector Wright. Am I in trouble? No, madam, not at all. I just need to understand what happened with Mr. Young's mailbox a couple weeks ago. Did you deliver mail here on January 23rd? I think so. I deliver here every day if there's mail. Do you remember the mailbox being removed? Jennifer's eyes widened. Oh, that. Yeah, when I came by that day, there was no mailbox. There was a note on a flag saying mail should be held at the HOA office. I didn't know what to do, so I took the mail back to the post office and asked my supervisor. "What did your supervisor tell you?" "She said to hold the mail at the post office until we got clarification. But then the next day or the day after, the mailbox was back, so I just went back to normal delivery." "Did you ever deliver any mail to the HOA office?" "No, sir. I wouldn't do that without proper authorization from the resident." Inspector Wright made notes. "Thank you, Miss Thompson. You did the right thing. If anything like this happens again, report it immediately to your supervisor and to our office." After Jennifer continued her route, Inspector Wright turned to me. "Good news for you. The mail was never actually diverted to the HOA, just held at the post office for a couple days." That means we're looking at attempted mail diversion rather than actual diversion, which is still serious but slightly less so. I'm going to interview the HOA board members and find out who made the decision to remove your mailbox and leave that note. Will anyone be charged? That depends on what I find in my investigation. At minimum, I'll be issuing a formal warning to the HOA about federal mail tampering laws. If I find evidence of intentional criminal conduct, charges could be filed. Over the next 2 weeks, things were blissfully quiet. The restraining order was working, and I didn't receive any more harassing notices from the HOA. I focused on work and started to relax, thinking maybe the worst was over. Then Dave called with news. "Marcus, we got a settlement offer from the HOA." "What are they offering?" $20,000, a written agreement that they'll never claim authority over your property again, a formal apology, and they'll pay our attorney's fees. Blake also said Patricia Henderson is resigning from the board. I let out a long breath. That's more than I expected. "It's a good offer," Dave said. "You'd be walking away with your attorney's fees covered, some money in your pocket, and a binding agreement that ends this forever. My recommendation is that you take it." "What about the criminal stuff? The postal inspector's investigation?" "That's separate. Your settlement doesn't affect whether federal charges get filed. Inspector Wright is still conducting his investigation." I thought about it for a moment. The truth was, I didn't want a prolonged legal battle. I just wanted to be left alone. "Okay, I'll take it. But I want the settlement agreement to be rock solid. If they violate it, I want significant penalties built in." "Already on it," Dave said. "I'll negotiate the final terms with Blake and have a draft for you to review in a few days." The settlement agreement was finalized in early March. The HOA paid me $20,000, agreed to never claim any authority over my property, issued a formal written apology, and paid all my attorney's fees, which totaled about $8,000. The agreement also included a liquidated damages clause stating that any future violation would result in an automatic $50,000 penalty, plus attorney's fees. Patricia Henderson resigned from the HOA board the same week the settlement was finalized. I heard through neighborhood gossip that there had been a contentious board meeting where other members blamed her for the whole fiasco and the expense of settling the lawsuit. Apparently, the HOA's insurance carrier had refused to cover the settlement because Patricia's actions were deemed intentional and outside the scope of her authority, so the money came directly from the HOA's reserves. This caused a special assessment to be levied on all HOA members to replenish the reserves, making Patricia even more unpopular with her neighbors. Valerie Cooper, the treasurer I'd spoken with, became the new HOA president. She sent me a personal letter apologizing for everything that had happened and assuring me that the new board had no intention of bothering me. Inspector Wright's investigation concluded in late March. He came by my house to give me an update in person. "Mr. Young, I wanted to let you know we've completed our investigation into the mail situation," he said. "We determined that Miss Henderson acted alone in removing your mailbox and leaving the note about mail diversion. She didn't actually contact the post office to arrange for diversion, which is why your carrier held the mail at the post office instead. So what happens to her? She's been issued a federal warning for attempted interference with mail delivery. If she ever does anything like this again, she'll face criminal charges. But given that the mail was never actually diverted and you've already resolved the civil matter through settlement, we decided not to pursue criminal charges at this time." I was slightly disappointed there wouldn't be charges, but I understood the reasoning. "I appreciate you taking this seriously, Inspector. Mail tampering is always serious," he said. "People need to understand they can't mess with other people's mail, even if they think they have a good reason." The Postal Service doesn't take kindly to it. After he left, I sat on my porch and looked out at my quiet street. Spring was starting to arrive in Denver, and the snow was melting. My mailbox stood exactly where it was supposed to be, black metal on a white post, not powder-coated bronze on stone veneer. My truck was parked in my driveway. My trash cans were wherever I wanted to put them. I'd spent months dealing with HOA harassment, spent thousands of my own time and stress fighting back, and ultimately won. But the victory felt less triumphant than I'd imagined. Mostly, I just felt tired and grateful it was over. The settlement money was nice, but what mattered most was the peace and quiet. I'd bought this house specifically to avoid HOA nonsense, and despite the nightmare with Patricia Henderson, I'd managed to protect that freedom. My property was mine, governed only by actual laws and my own common sense, not by the arbitrary whims of a neighborhood board. I later learned that the Meadowbrook Hills HOA had adopted new policies after the lawsuit. They created a formal procedure for verifying whether properties were actually part of the HOA before issuing violations, and they instituted mandatory training for board members on property law and the limits of HOA authority. Apparently, my lawsuit had become a cautionary tale in the neighborhood about what happens when HOAs overreach. Several of my neighbors stopped by over the following weeks to congratulate me. A couple of them were actually HOA members who'd grown frustrated with Patricia's authoritarian approach and were glad someone had finally stood up to her. One neighbor, a retired accountant named Greg, told me that the special assessment to cover my settlement had been the final straw for many residents, and there was talk of trying to dissolve the HOA entirely, though he doubted it would actually happen. "You did us all a favor," Greg said. Patricia needed to be taken down a peg. She was treating the HOA like her personal kingdom. I also heard that Susan Richards, the woman who'd been with Patricia when they trespassed, had resigned from the architectural committee. She'd been horrified to learn she'd participated in illegal trespassing and wanted nothing more to do with HOA enforcement activities. In April, I was contacted by a reporter from a local newspaper who'd somehow heard about the lawsuit. She wanted to do a story about HOA overreach and asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed. I declined, not wanting to draw more attention to myself, but I did give her Dave's contact information in case she wanted the legal perspective. The article ran a few weeks later under the headline, "When HOAs Go Too Far, Local Homeowner Fights Back Against Harassment." It detailed my case without using my name and included commentary from Dave about the importance of homeowners understanding their rights. It also featured quotes from a local real estate attorney explaining how to verify HOA membership when buying property, and statistics about the rising number of HOA disputes in Colorado, Dave called me after the article came out. "Marcus, you may have just become the poster child for HOA resistance. I've gotten half a dozen calls from people dealing with similar situations. Are you taking the cases? Some of them. A few are legitimate disputes. Others are people who actually are HOA members but don't want to follow reasonable rules. The key difference with your case was that you genuinely weren't a member and had documentation to prove it." Life gradually returned to normal. I continued working as a construction project manager, managing renovations and new builds around the Denver metro area. My house remained blissfully free of HOA interference. I kept my security cameras running, more out of general home security than any real fear the HOA would come back, but they never triggered another alert involving Patricia or any other board members. In June, I was working in my front yard planting some new flowers when a car pulled up and a woman I didn't recognize got out. For a brief moment, I tensed, wondering if this was another HOA situation, but she immediately introduced herself with a warm smile. "Hi, I'm Rachel Young. I just moved into the house 3 doors down. I wanted to introduce myself to the neighbors." We chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, and she mentioned she'd bought a house inside the HOA development. "I heard there was some drama with the old board president," she said, "but everyone I've talked to says the new board is much more reasonable." "That's good to hear," I said diplomatically. "I also heard there's one house on this street that's not in the HOA. Is that you?" I nodded. "Yeah, that's me," she laughed. "Lucky you. I probably would have bought a non-HOA house if I'd found one, but they're pretty rare around here. Mind if I ask how you managed it?" I gave her the short version of how my house predated the HOA. She listened with interest, then said, "Well, good for you for standing your ground. I heard the old president got pretty crazy about it." "That's one way to put it," I said. Rachel turned out to be a good neighbor. She was friendly but not intrusive, and we'd wave to each other when our paths crossed. She also occasionally asked for recommendations on contractors or services, which I was happy to provide given my work in construction. By summer, the HOA situation felt like ancient history. I'd taken the settlement money and used part of it to build a deck in my backyard, something I'd been wanting to do for years. I didn't need HOA approval for the design or materials. I just pulled a permit from the city and built it according to code. It was a beautiful cedar deck with built-in benches and a pergola, and I spent many summer evenings out there grilling and enjoying the peace and quiet. One evening in July, I was on my deck when my phone rang. It was Valerie Cooper, the new HOA president. My first instinct was annoyance, wondering if the HOA was going to start causing problems again despite the settlement. But Valerie's tone was friendly and professional. "Marcus, I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to reach out about something completely unrelated to the past issues. The HOA is planning to repave the walking trail that runs near your property, and we wanted to give you a heads up in case there's any noise or disruption." "Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know. When is that happening?" "Probably in August. We're still finalizing the contractor." I also wanted to ask, and please feel free to say no, but the new trail is going to be wider and better lit. We're planning to plant some trees along it, and there's a section near your property line that could benefit from some additional landscaping. We were wondering if you'd be willing to let us plant a few trees on your property, with your full approval of the species and location, of course. We'd pay for everything and maintain them. I was quiet for a moment, considering. Why would you want to plant trees on my property, honestly? Because that section is visible from the trail, and some nice trees would look good there. But more importantly, we're trying to turn over a new leaf with how the HOA operates. The old board had this mindset of demanding and controlling. We want to actually work with people, especially you given the history. This would be purely voluntary. You'd retain full ownership and control, and if you say no, that's completely fine. I appreciated her candor. Can you send me some information about what you're thinking? Tree species, locations, that kind of thing? I want to think about it. Absolutely. I'll put together a proposal and email it to you. No pressure whatsoever. True to her word, Valerie sent me a detailed proposal a few days later. It included 3 mature maple trees that would be planted along my property line, providing shade and visual appeal. The HOA would pay for the trees, professional planting, and ongoing maintenance for the first 2 years. After that, maintenance would be my responsibility, but mature maples are pretty low maintenance. I talked it over with Dave, who reviewed the proposal from a legal perspective and said it looked fine. They're clearly trying to make amends, he said. This is completely voluntary. You retain full ownership, and it actually benefits your property. I don't see any downside. I agreed to the tree planting, and the work was done in early September. The landscaping crew the HOA hired was professional and courteous, and the 3 maples looked fantastic once they were in the ground. Valerie stopped by after the work was complete to make sure I was satisfied, and I told her I was. "Thank you for giving us a chance to do something positive," she said. "The board really wants to put the past behind us and be good neighbors." "I appreciate that," I said, "and I appreciate you actually asking permission and treating me with respect." "That's how it should have been from the beginning," Valerie said. "We learned a hard lesson about respecting property rights and boundaries. It cost the HOA a lot of money and damaged a lot of relationships. We're trying to do better." As autumn arrived and the leaves on my new maple trees turned brilliant shades of red and gold, I reflected on the entire experience. It had been stressful, expensive, and frustrating, but ultimately I'd won. I'd protected my property rights, established clear legal boundaries, and forced the HOA to back down. More importantly, the situation had exposed serious problems with how the HOA was being run, and the current board seemed genuinely committed to reform. Patricia Henderson's authoritarian approach had backfired spectacularly, costing the HOA money and credibility. The new board was reaping the consequences, but also the opportunity to rebuild. I still had my security cameras, and I still kept all the documentation from the lawsuit in a safe place, just in case. But I no longer felt like I was under siege. My house was my own, my property was my own, and I had legal protections in place to keep it that way. On a cool October evening, I was on my deck watching the sunset when Greg, my retired accountant neighbor, stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. "Thought you might like to know," he said, handing me a bottle. The HOA just voted to update their bylaws to include specific language about respecting non-member properties. They're also requiring background checks and training for anyone who wants to serve on the board. Your lawsuit basically rewrote how they operate. I took a sip of beer and smiled. Good. Maybe the next person who stands up to them won't have to go through what I did. "You know what the ironic thing is," Greg said. "A bunch of people in the neighborhood are now jealous of you for not being in the HOA. Property values have gone up across the board, so it's not like your non-membership hurt anyone. But you get to do whatever you want with your property while the rest of us have to get approval for every little thing." "That was kind of the point," I said. "I like being able to make my own decisions." We sat there watching the sun go down, drinking beer and chatting about nothing in particular. It was peaceful, exactly what I'd wanted when I bought this house. The HOA never bothered me again. Valerie served as president for 2 years and did a good job by all accounts, focusing on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement. When her term ended, she was replaced by another reasonable person who continued the reformed approach. I never became friends with any of the board members, but we maintained a cordial, respectful relationship. They'd learned I wasn't someone to be pushed around, and I'd learned that not everyone in the HOA was as unreasonable as Patricia Henderson. My mailbox stayed where it belonged, black metal on a white post. My truck stayed parked in my driveway. My trash cans went out whenever I needed them to. And my property remained my own, free from HOA control, just as it should be. Looking back, I'm glad I fought. It would have been easier to just give in, to accept their demands and follow their rules to avoid conflict. But that would have been surrendering rights I'd specifically purchased when I bought this house. It would have validated their overreach and encouraged them to do the same thing to others. Standing up to the HOA wasn't just about me. It was about the principle that property rights matter, that HOAs don't have unlimited authority, and that bullies need to be confronted. Patricia Henderson had counted on me backing down, on being intimidated by official-looking notices and threats of legal action. When I called her bluff and fought back with real documentation and legal support, her whole house of cards collapsed. The settlement money was nice, but the real victory was much simpler than that. I could sit on my deck, look out at my yard with my 3 maple trees, my black mailbox visible from the street, my truck in the driveway, and know that every bit of it was mine to control. No HOA board could tell me what color to paint my house, where to park my vehicle, or when to put out my trash. I was free to live my life according to my own standards and the actual laws of the land, not the arbitrary whims of a neighborhood association. That freedom was worth fighting for, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The HOA demanded I clear snow from their common area, tried to force me to follow their rules, and attempted to treat me like a member. I told them to leave, backed it up with legal action, and won decisively. Sometimes the little guy actually does win against bureaucratic overreach, and this was one of those times. As I finished my beer and headed inside for the night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My home was my castle, my property was my own, and no HOA would ever change that. The snow had long since melted, spring had come and gone, and autumn was settling into the Colorado landscape. Life was good, and I was exactly where I wanted to be, living exactly how I wanted to live. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for your rights, the importance of documentation, and the power of good legal representation. It also taught me that sometimes the loudest, most aggressive people are actually the weakest when challenged properly. Patricia Henderson's bluster and threats crumbled as soon as she faced real opposition backed by facts and law. I hope that somewhere out there, other homeowners dealing with similar situations might hear about my case and realize they don't have to be victimized by HOA overreach. You have rights. Those rights are enforceable, and sometimes you need to be willing to fight to protect them. My house stands as it always has, a small island of independence in a sea of HOA uniformity, and that's exactly how it's going to stay.